Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hello and welcome to this CNBC TV18 special. We are under a tree at the IIT Bombay campus and I have with me Bhavish Aggarwal, co-founder of Ola. Thanks very much for joining us here, Bhavish.
Wonderful.
Quite an unusual setting.
Yeah. This is home for me. I grew up here, spent 4 wonderful years of my life here.
Right.
So I'm really excited to be back here.
Okay, so let me, since you're excited to be back, let's talk about the day you perhaps got the letter from IIT Bombay saying that you've been accepted into this very premier institute. You grew up in Ludhiana.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that day when that letter came through.
Yeah. Very interesting memory for me, because when it was a computer screen, it was not a letter.
Okay.
So I put my roll number in, my father was looking over my shoulder, and then the computer tells you the rank and then the fact that you've gotten in. And my rank was 23. Which is quite a good rank.
Did you expect that rank? Were you expecting
Not that much, not that great, but I was expecting a decent rank. And my father was happy, but he said, "Isse acha kar sakte the tum." Typical middle class Indian, right?
Middle class Indian family reaction to any achievement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the first time you ever came to Bombay was when you came onto this campus.
Yes.
Do you remember your first couple of days here? You hooked up with your co-founder Ankit Bhati here.
Yeah.
You shared a dorm room?
Yeah. So, the first time I ever came was for IIT to Bombay, and it was such a cultural change for me, right? Growing up in Ludhiana was very different. Small town, up north, Bombay is cosmopolitan, full of energy. So it was a big shock for me in a positive way. And, getting into IIT, the first person I met was Ankit, my co-founder. Yeah, first person, because he came and we were wingmates, next rooms to each other. And he came and knocked on my door, introduced himself, and then I introduced myself, and we've been best friends since.
All right. So tell us what you guys were up to. I believe that you guys used to spend some time in your classes, but spend a lot of time hatching interesting ideas, doing work on the site. What did it take to actually get your first business? I believe you used to build websites and so on.
At IIT, because it has the best students from across the country, right? The peer group is really the key asset. And when you interact with people who are much brighter than you learn so much. And Ankit and I we were best friends from day one, so we used to do a lot of things together. Some things I can't say on camera, but many other things, we used to always dream about that eventually we'll start our own company together, and we used to do some extracurricular work for some pocket money. As students, you'd love some extra pocket money, but more so for the experience of engaging with the real world outside. And that taught us a lot about how to engage. The first project we ever did, we never got paid for it.
Okay, that was a big lesson then.
Yeah, that was a big lesson, how to collect. But those engagements really taught us about, the core principles of business and of doing something on your own, right? How do you do sales? How do you do commercial thinking and negotiate, right? How do you deliver a project on time, right? There's small things that it's very important that you learn them early on, and it grounds your long-term business life, right? So Ankit and I and it builds such a deep camaraderie between me and Ankit.
All right, so now let's talk about the start of the Ola journey. So it was Ola Trips first. You were looking at doing weekend getaways from Bombay.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from? Was it a pain point for you? And tell us how it became Ola Cabs and now Ola.
And after I graduated in 2008, I went over to Microsoft and started working there in Bangalore. And Ankit continued studying. He was in a master's program after that, so he spent 2 more years studying. And even while I was working for 2 years, we were always in touch, brainstorming on ideas. And so the first idea we rejected a lot of ideas, but the first idea we started off with was this olatrip.com. Which was a portal to book weekend breaks, like you want to go to Lonavala, we'll help you with the hotels and car bookings and all of that. But while doing that, very quickly we realized that transportation is actually a much bigger problem. We had our own pain points, and when we were trying to sell trips to consumers, they were telling us that please help us with the transportation. So that's how we then pivoted into the business of transportation.
You have now raised, right, $3.9 billion, if I have that correctly. But what was it like getting that first check? How difficult was it when you had had some operations on, but you knew that you really need the money? And what did you really need that first check for? What was the bottleneck that you were hitting, and how did you go about approaching angel investors at that point of time to raise that money?
When we started off, both Ankit and I had very little money, because I had just worked for 2 years in a very junior job, just out of college, and Ankit had never worked. So we didn't have any cash, And whatever little I had saved up, I had invested in the company, which was like 2-3 lakh rupees. So, and half of that living in Bombay just flew away in rent. We started interacting with the angel community. It was still very early back then, so the angel community and network was not very active. And that's the toughest fundraising I've ever done in my life. And I remember things like, because we were just out of college and we had never run a business, right? So the kind of questions they asked, I had no clue about. Like one angel investor asked me to build an org structure. And I didn't know what an org structure is. And I'm sure if the entrepreneurs hear that today, they'll be horrified.
Right.
But that's how we started. It was very organic and first principles evolution.
The last year for you at Ola in terms of just fundraising has been a significant year, right? And of course, along with Tiger Global, who was one of your early investors, they came in at 5 million in a Series A round. Exiting from the board. Tell us about how you landed that 5 million from Leaf Excel. What was the experience like? What was the things that he asked you? And you've had a long association with him over the years. And he's now moved out, and the other big daddy, Masa Son and SoftBank are on.
So Lee is a very sharp investor, and he saw the Indian opportunity early before most other venture capital investors in the global world saw the Indian opportunity, and he did the deal with us within a few weeks. Okay. He saw the opportunity, the macro consumer opportunity. He saw the business model that we were trying to build, and he saw value in it. And he gave us and I think he saw the entrepreneurial ability of Ankit and me. So he gave us the check, and he's been a big supporter of us all along. And we've been actually lucky that through our journey we've had a very good set of shareholders and investors who have supported us and our vision for the long term, right? Be it SoftBank, Masa Son is a visionary entrepreneur, and there's so much inspiration and learning that we get from him. Or to Tencent, who recently joined us as a shareholder. They've obviously built a very impressive company globally. We also have had a bunch of financial investors. Lee is one of them, Avnish at Matrix, very early supporter, and somebody who's really helped me personally as an entrepreneur.
All right, what are some of the lessons that you want to pass on, or some of the things that you would like to share with young entrepreneurs on their fundraising journey? What are some of the things that have held you in good stead? Perhaps advice from your own investors that's come to you on fundraising.
See, fundraising, the tactics of fundraising are fairly easy to figure out once you get into it and do it a few times. But the most important strategic element in fundraising is having a good business. It sounds very simple, but that is the first principles input into a good fundraising. So entrepreneurs should always focus on business first and investors second.
All right, and talking about solid business and ownership of that business, there were reports recently that you've redone this, sort of articles of association in the company so that board approval or founder approval is sought on certain matters of significance like mergers and acquisition and so on and so forth. That also Ankit and you will maintain a certain amount of stake in the company. Has this become important in the light of some of the goings on in 2017, especially with what we saw go down at Snapdeal with an intended merger with Flipkart, orchestrated by SoftBank that didn't work out?
See, Kunal is a very dear friend and he's an entrepreneur I respect a lot, and I'm 100% certain that he will create a very large company and build a lot of value for himself and his shareholders. From our perspective, Ankit and I have always been very focused on building a long-term business. And our ambition is to create an institution, just like there are many large institutions, business institutions in India. And towards that end, we have again been very lucky that we have very supportive shareholders all around. It's not driven by any paranoia, but it's driven by the future of the kind of company we want to create. And all our shareholders are very supportive towards that vision.
All right, great. So we'll talk more about that vision and more about the business that Ola is going to build over the next 10 years, the future of mobility in India, not just India, but the world now as well. And we'll come back after this very short break. So keep watching CNBC TV18. Hello and welcome to this CNBC TV18 special. We come to you from the IIT Bombay campus, and I'm in conversation with Bhavish Aggarwal of Ola.
This is home for me. I've spent 4 years growing up here of college, and me and Ankit, my co-founder, both were in the same hostel. In fact, we were wingmates. So we've done a lot of masti on these roads. And we've had a lot of sleepless nights dreaming about ideas, thinking together about how we will quote unquote change the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So changing the world, Bhavish, now that is, if I read things correctly, at the core of what you're doing with Ola and the mission that you have picked up now as far as mobility is concerned, right? It's not just a cab hailing company on a smartphone, right? It's become much more. And one of your biggest push last year and will continuing into 2018 is going to be on the electric vehicle side. So talk us through that. Of course, the might of the government is behind this, a 2030, vision that we have of going fully electric as a country is concerned. Talk us through what you've been able to achieve so far and what your plans are for the next 2 years or so.
Sure. See, our mission is to build mobility for 1 billion Indians, and mobility is such a utilitarian need for any economy, right? And with mobility services comes economic freedom. If you can travel to somewhere, you can do some economic activity, right? And our country traditionally has had less infrastructure for mobility. Road density is lesser, public transport in most cities is not that well developed. So it's our mission that we can help create the future of mobility in India, using modern technologies and business models. One of those focus areas is electric vehicles, right? Now, if you look at the pollution challenge in our cities, it is quite intense, and all of us as citizens feel it. And the government has set a very inspiring and encouraging vision and goalpost for the entire industry and the country about 2030, right? And we want to do our bit. We want to rally the entire ecosystem and accelerate the journey.
Experiment, so to speak, was in Nagpur. You tied up with, I think the vehicles came from M&M, the battery and the charging points came from in collaboration with IOC. What was that as a learning experience? What were the chinks in the armor that you found that you want to now correct for the next pilot, and where is the next pilot?
So our objective with the Nagpur pilot was to do one of the world's first multimodal electric mobility pilots, set up the infrastructure also along with it, and learn about the operational needs of electrification in a country like India. And we've had learnings on how you put electrification in hot temperatures. Nagpur is one of the hottest cities in the country.
Right.
And how do you scale up these kind of services when they run 100, 200 kilometers a day? Each vehicle has to run that much kilometers a day. And there are a lot of learnings which we have taken and which we will start deploying over other future pilots and eventually in full-time product.
So is Nagpur still ongoing? When can we expect the next city to happen? First quarter, second quarter this year? What are we looking at?
So Nagpur is still ongoing, and it's been a very enriching pilot experience. Now, over this year, you will see some more scale happen in that initiative for us.
Okay.
Whether that will be a pilot or it will be a full-scale launch, I can't share right now. But we are very focused on electrification.
All right. There were also some reports of you having tied up with the Tata Nano for an electric vehicle in Delhi NCR, where the need is dire. So what are the plans there? So M&M kind of fronted Nagpur, Tata Nano you're looking to front Delhi NCR. Talk us through these partnerships.
So our partnerships are not with a single OEM. We have a multimodal pilot, so from auto rickshaws to e-rickshaws to cars and buses. So even in Nagpur, it was not a single OEM, although Mahindra is a very important strategic partner of ours. And going forward also, we will work with the entire ecosystem of car makers, of infrastructure providers, and we are as a mobility services company bringing it all together and helping accelerate that journey.
All right. Over a period of time, Bhavish, how much do you expect electric vehicles to in terms of revenue share to the business to generate? How much do you see it in terms of a percentage or ratio? What's your vision?
So the vision is, can every single kilometer run on Ola be electric in a few years, right?
Can it be?
Definitely, definitely.
Okay.
And that's our vision. That's what drives us, right? And is there a clear path to it today? No. But there is an end goal, and then we have to innovate as an industry and get to that end goal, right?
Okay.
Innovation has to happen on cost structures of these electric vehicles, on the suitability of the technology for the Indian environment, which is much more hotter and dustier, right? In our use case, specifically the car or the vehicle runs a lot more every day than a consumer use case. So all these innovations have to happen, and we are working with the industry very actively on all these innovations.
How much of this is happening inside the Ola labs, so to speak, and how much of it is happening on the part of the OEMs? What kind of partnerships are those? Are those like joint research projects that you all are working on, or is it more just acquiring a fleet or acquiring technology, tweaking it at your end? How is it working?
So we are working in close collaboration with most OEMs. Because when we and OEM sit together, we can share best of both worlds. We understand what the consumer needs from a services perspective. We understand what the vehicle needs when it runs 200 kilometers a day. And the OEM obviously understands the vehicle manufacturing process as deeply as anybody else, right? So that's our goal. We want to be a catalyst and an accelerator towards this ecosystem.
All right. So in terms of a fleet size, if you want every Ola car in the near future to be an electric one, what are the numbers that we are looking at? And do we have that kind of capacity now? And is that capacity, lack of capacity at the end of the OEMs actually becoming a sort of obstacle for the kind of rollout that you might want to achieve?
See, the electrification mission is not an overnight mission, right? And I think the OEMs are very mature businesses, and they are all focused on how do we do this transition over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And to that extent, all of them are thinking about and already starting to invest in capacity for either battery creation or vehicle manufacturing for electric vehicles, right? And we are working in partnership with them to help them understand the demand. Already on our platform, we have almost 1 million vehicles, right? And all of those should eventually be electric in a decade. And by a decade, our scale will also be much larger because this industry is growing so much. So there's going to be a lot of demand for electrification.
Okay. Since you spoke of vehicles on your platform, when we spoke last year, I think around the same time, you spoke of how you are now looking more aggressively at owning your own fleet.
Yes.
And that you found that to be a more sustainable way of building out the Ola business than to purely work on driver incentives. So tell us where things stand. How much of your fleet presently is owned and what has that contributed in terms of perhaps lowering your overall costs and bettering your margins and so on?
But there are a lot of potential drivers who want to enter this ecosystem but who don't have the ability to buy their own car. It's for that segment that we created the Ola Fleet program, which has scaled up well. And what it does is it helps these new entrants into this ecosystem buy, use the first car, earn some money, and then eventually buy a car of their own, and then in a few years buy a fleet, right, of their own. So this is the progression from a driver partner's perspective that the fleet enables.
And from the business point of view, what has this done in terms of cut down your burn, in terms of make your business a little more rational? I think there was also a report that perhaps in FY19 is when you're going to look at hitting profitability, which is fine because when we spoke last year, in February 2017, you told me 18 to 24 months. So are we still on target for that?
Yeah, no, our business is growing well, and the unit economics and the profitability are also growing well. As our scale improves, the network effects of our business model kick in, and profitability improves, and that's what's happening. And we are on a path to profitability in the next few quarters, and we will definitely continue to aim for that.
All right. Since we are talking about technology and about Ola's focus, assisted driving, Ola Play, the platform, you want to build it out. How so do you want to build it out apart from just a customer-centric approach? Are we looking at more assisted driving experiments happening internally? When could we perhaps see something interesting happening that we might experience as consumers, or even your driver partners have already started perhaps experiencing?
So Ola Play is actually a connected car platform. It's not just an entertainment platform, but we are going to deploy assisted driving and safety enhancing features gradually over that. And we are in the process of doing R&D on those things, developing them, and eventually they'll start getting rolled out on all the cars that has Ola Play deployed.
All right. And what kind of assisted driving are we looking at? Are we looking at, intelligent braking systems? Are we just looking at better tracking, better metrics from maintenance of those cars? What are we looking at?
So it's a very broad vision over there. If we can help the driver and the car owner with smart telematics, with smart predictive maintenance, if we can help the customer with safety enhancing features like if there's a accident and the camera sees that that's going to happen, it can raise an alert. So there are a lot of capabilities that an AI-driven platform like Ola Play will be able to enhance. And that's the focus, and you will see this start to slowly roll out in the next year.
All right, okay. Bhavish, as we were talking about different verticals that you're growing out, Ola Cafe is something that you shut down in 2016, but you're now revisiting with the acquisition of Foodpanda. Why is now the right time, you believe, to put your finger back into that pie?
See, we believe the food business and the food services business is a very large consumer play in India. And we feel we have some value to add in that business with our ability to manage logistics at scale, the real-time intracity logistics at scale, and the kind of consumer base we have. So we have a structural advantage to play in that business. And we always were interested in that business. When we did Ola Cafe, it was, it was an experiment, and we wanted to learn about that industry, and we gained from that experiment. And we shut it down because at that time our focus was on the transportation business. But having scaled up, we feel that this is the right time to re-enter the food business.
It has nothing to do with Uber Eats launching in August last year.
No, definitely not. Even when we did Ola Cafe, it had nothing to do. We are not a competition-focused company.
Okay.
We are a consumer-focused company.
All right.
And consumers will always need food. Yeah.
They will always need food, and people in parts of the subcontinent outside India will also need Ola. What's happening with the foray into Bangladesh, Sri Lanka? There were also reports that you're looking as far as Australia and New Zealand. Any credence to that? And what are the plans there?
So we're definitely launching in the subcontinent, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. These are countries with very similar ecosystems like India and very similar transportation challenges, and we feel we have a business model which can be very relevant in those countries. So at the right time, we will definitely foray into those markets.
Okay. So the foray is not underway right now. Part of your IIT Bombay mafia that makes up, the leadership at Ola, not already looking at some of those markets actively?
We keep exploring things which we don't announce.
All right, all right. So one last thing, and I'm going to quote you, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So you said, I was 24 when I started. I had a girlfriend, but I wasn't married. I had no money, so there was no risk of losing anything. Okay?
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
I don't think entrepreneurs are driven by fear. Entrepreneurs are driven by the challenge and the opportunity, and for me personally and for Ola, we are driven by the impact that we want to create for society and for the country, right? So that's our motivation, and that remains as expansive as ever.
What keeps you up at night?
The opportunity to provide mobility for 1 billion people.
All right. Okay, on that note, thank you, Bhavish, for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for this special telecast from IIT Bombay. Keep watching CNBC TV18.